Wonderful. I'm so happy that we made it. So, when did you decide to write this book, and what Marx has got to do with
it? I'm an expert of Marxism.
Yeah.
I wrote my dissertation on Marx's ecology.
Yes.
That was around 2017.
Yeah.
So the book is about how Marx was actually seriously interested in ecological issues, and we need to sort of use him again as a sort of source of inspiration, because we live in an age of ecological crisis and so on. Yeah. But at the time, many people reacted to my book that, okay, we understand, it's convincing, Marx is an ecologist, but he's kind of outdated. He's a 19th century scholar. So why do we need to read him again? There are a lot of discussions on ecology in the 20th and 21st century. So we don't have to go back to 19th century and so on.
Yeah.
So my next project was, I realized I have to show that Marx is useful even in the 21st century, because his idea not only shows problems of capitalism in terms of destruction of nature, but he's also useful to imagine the post-capitalist society, how we can actually overcome and then live in a more sustainable and a just society, which he called communism. The communism is, of course, very broad term, and we often associate the term with the Soviet Union and China, and we have very bad image. But we don't have to say that Marx was also a kind of Stalinist. He had also different views of post-capitalism, and that's why I tried to reinterpret Marx, especially the late Marx, in where he actually really changed his view. He became, in my book, I said he accepted kind of the idea of degrowth. And I said that actually degrowth is a very important idea. And actually we can integrate Marx's idea into this kind of the degrowth critique of capitalism and so on. And this has become very successful in Japan, because it appeared in the middle of pandemic. Pandemic, like in society like Italy and the society, it really revealed many contradictions of capitalism, inequality, destruction of nature, and so on. So that book in Japan was published in two years ago.
2020, right?
September 2020, and that was in the middle of pandemic. So people sort of reflected on their life under capitalism during the lockdown, and they realized, oh, this is not sustainable, and we didn't, we were not happy even before the pandemic and so on. And then this kind of radical idea, which has been also marginalized even in Japan in the last 20 or 30 years, has sort of come back to the mass media, and there are a lot of discussions in last 2 years.
Okay, you're not advocating for reforming capitalism in a way, but radically changing it practically. Can you give me as many practical examples? Of course, I've read a couple of articles about you, but if we may go more into practicality, I mean, you quote shortening working hours, for instance.
Work hour.
Yes, or more caregivers. But I mean, if you can make more examples on which way you are thinking of changing radically capitalism, that would help.
Okay, the reason why I think we cannot simply reform capitalism is because of the ecological crisis. We are really hitting the critical point where we are reaching to the very dangerous state of emergency, especially in terms of climate change. So this is why the interest in degrowth is growing everywhere, including Europe.
Yeah.
But my point is degrowth cannot be achieved under capitalism, because capitalism is a system of constant growing. Marx defined capitalism is the endless process of valorization, increasing capital. So we cannot have a degrowth capitalism. It's a contradictory, and also it's something like Japan. Japanese economy has not grown in the last 30 years, but Japan is of course capitalism. So capitalism without growth is not a degrowth, it's a recession, and it creates many problems because our society is organized around growing, but it's not growing in reality, so it causes many problems: poverty, unemployment, and the austerity and so on. So I advocate, if we really have to take seriously the idea of degrowth, we have to imagine a kind of degrowth society, post-capitalist degrowth society. But the main discourse is about we can actually reform capitalism. We can invest more in renewable energies and electronic vehicles and so on. But I argue, using various data and articles, that we are really compelled to reduce carbon dioxide in 10 years or 20 years. So that's not possible. The so-called decoupling of economic growth from greenhouse gas emission is not taking place. So that's why I don't think the Green New Deal and other kinds of the green reformation of capitalism is not working. And we can, I'm also aware, but however, at the same time, that we cannot simply move into a degrowth society. That's obviously very utopian. But my point is, if we cannot grow, we need to share more. Because the whole pie of economy is constant. And then we need to share more because there are poverty, and we, even in the developed countries, there are a lot of people who cannot afford many things that are essential for living and so on. So we need to share more. That's the basic idea of communism. But my idea of communism is not about the abolition of market or the abolition of money and commodity. That's too much. I mean, we cannot imagine that kind of society, at least at the moment. So we can, why don't we start with a kind of reforming capitalism? That's one proposal, was reducing work day, because in Japan we work too hard and everything is open for 24 hours and no open on Sundays and so on. But we can reduce the number of convenience stores, and we can reduce fast fashion, fast food, and these things can actually be reduced by half or something like that, because it's now excessive. So that's one kind of the degrowth. But we can also ban private jet, of course, but we can also ban short domestic flights as well. We can also reduce the cruise ships, like the very gigantic luxurious ships, but also we can reduce sports cars and SUVs, and we can also reduce the meat consumption and so on. But these measures actually, are very compatible with the idea of degrowth. But you may say that these kind of things can be also introduced within capitalism. But I think this is a kind of very important first step to create a society where our thinking and activities are not growth oriented anymore. We spend more time on other activities. For example, in Japan, on weekends, we of course do not work, but everything is open, like shopping mall, department store. So we just go there and then keep consuming. Then we spend money, and we have to work again hard because we spend all the money on the weekend. We have to work again. But if everything is closed on weekends, we start going to park. We might do more sports. we do other, non-commercial activities and so on. So I think that we need to organize the society in a way that it can be more friendly to doing something that we don't have to use money. For example, we can also reduce the number of cards because we spend a lot of money for cards and maintaining cards, but we can have a more bicycle roads and so on. So these measures are actually implemented already in Europe, partially at least. And I actually argue in my book that, for example, the cities like Barcelona and Paris are a very good example of moving beyond some kind of very growth thinking, growth paradigm. And they spend more money and energy on public services and reducing the number of cars and building more parks instead of high buildings and so on. And these measures are, of course, taking place within capitalism, but we are heading towards a society where we don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money and we have to work a lot long hours in order to keep consuming cars and beef and flight and so on.
I see. It's hard to imagine in a country like yours, which invented a specific term for debt for excessive work, which is karoshi. It's hard to imagine. I've visited your country a couple of times many years ago, and it's hard to imagine that people so hardworking like yours can go back to a different mindset like the one you are proposing. Don't you think that, particularly for your country, this is a tough sell?
Exactly. This is why it's very radical in Japan to advocate say 4 work days. So we have, for example, Wednesday off, in addition to Saturday and Sunday. But we work so hard, so it's very easy actually to take a day off, because other countries like Italy or Spain, people don't work as much as Japanese people, but the society still fine, Italy has also many problems now, but
of course.
It's not like people are dying everywhere. Society actually can reproduce itself, but it's very strange. Like in Japan, everything is open, and everything, if you order on Amazon, it comes like next day, but in Tokyo, it comes on the same day. So why do we need to do that? It's very wasteful and excessive, because if you can actually order everything and then it comes in a few hours, you keep consuming, right? It's very convenient, but you just spend more and more money, and then it also bad for the environment and so on. So I think my proposals in my book may not seem so radical to Europeans, because this book was written in Japan, but in Japan, society like Japan, people work too hard and everything is open, so people keep consuming. So the idea of reducing work hours and consumption, so that we can have non-commercial activities, spending time with friends and family, and that kind of thing. But it really actually was partially realized during the pandemic, because people started working from home, and then the restaurants and department store were actually closed. After, especially, it was prohibited to serve alcohol in restaurants. So in Japan, there's a drinking culture, but then those things have been closed. So people go home right after the work, or they simply walk home and then spend more time with family and maybe only very close friends. And that really created a different, more healthy and sometimes more happy social life. So I think it really and enable the Japanese people to reflect upon the problems of such a long working hours. And then I think that my proposal was kind of accepted to some extent. And then another example is I also proposed that introducing the maximal income, like after 1 million US dollar or something like that, it's and you cannot earn more than 1 million euro. 1 million euro is obviously too much for many people, and we can actually set that kind of limitation, because otherwise people want more money all the time. Even after 1 million, you want 2 million or 3 million. So I think by limiting those things, it's a very idea of degrowth, but by limiting our activities, we can have more time and energy to spend our life on something more meaningful, and that will bring more well-being and happiness to the society, I think.
This is very, very radical. I mean, the maximum income. I mean, I myself have just written a small book which is called Giga Capitalist, which is telling, which is trying to make an argument on why the wealth and power of people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, and some other tech titans is endangering society, because they are too powerful. They are too rich, so they're too powerful. So, I mean, your ideas definitely resonates with me, but I'm considering kind of radical myself. But you go way, way beyond, because this idea of maximum income, that would make sense, but that would be totally upending the logics of capitalism. Because, as you know, I mean, the market, the market is willing to give you, to give a soccer player 20 millions or 200 millions, like Cristiano Ronaldo, for to go play in another team. The market is the master, and to append that you need, I'm afraid, real revolution. Don't you think?
But you know, the point is that, you know, my generation, when I was in high school, people like Zidane or Beckham played in World Cup. So at that time, you know, they earned a lot of money, but it's not as much as Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Yes. And you know, those players today earn, I don't know, 5 times more or even 10 times more money than Beckham and Zidane. But football itself, so soccer itself, didn't become 5 times or 10 times more fun, right? I mean, same. So I think even by limiting for example, the income of football players, you can actually still have a very good football player, because football player can only do football, so they have to do football anyways, and they do their best, at least within this limit. So I think, like, even like today's World Cup, you know, it's just so much commercializing, and it's just excessive commercials that really destroy the basic idea of World Cup, or, you know, or even the Olympics. It's even worse. But so I think by limiting those things to the excessive, at least if we can begin with the excessive commercialization, because, for example, why do we need to build new stadiums every 4 years during Olympics and World Cups in the age of ecological crisis? I think we can reuse existing stadiums. So these things can simply be implemented, I would say, that even within capitalism, but I think it will bring a very different praxis and ideas into capitalism that will actually grow into a more post-capitalist society. So I would say that simply introducing maximal income can be achieved within capitalism. So I don't think we need a real revolution. Of course, many people object, but I think even the football players, they don't earn money from high salary of Cristiano Ronaldo. They are rather paying more money for buying tickets and watching TV and buying the uniforms and so on. But that's ridiculous. That has nothing to do with the joy of football. So I think even the supporters and you know, the other audiences can say, okay, this is not fair. Only the Real Madrid has all the super player. That's not fair. That's not making football more fun. So why don't we implement a more democratic and equal way of regulating the football that will actually may enhance the quality of sports, right? So by making those kind of arguments, I think people would be more attracted to the idea of, implementing a maximal income in maybe say in the sports for first, but we can do the same thing to Bill Gates and Elon Musk's. But they, of course, they are very smart people and they are entitled to earn more money than others. But it doesn't mean that they are entitled to earn as much as they can destroy the whole planet. They are really spending their money for flying everywhere with the private jets and is building a gigantic house that they only live for 2 weeks every year because they have houses everywhere and so on. This is ridiculous, and they are now spending money for going to the universe, the space outside the Earth. So that's very ridiculous. Like when we are really have serious problems on this Earth, like pandemic, war, and the climate crisis, and why they're spending the whole thing for going? Why are they trying to leave the planet? And I think we can sort of regulate these things so that we can really focus on important issues like climate crisis and the war and the pandemic. I think this is a way of regulation within capitalism, but which will actually lead to more different ways of living. Which
I definitely agree. This paradox that you just highlighted. I mean, they are so focused on other planets while we are suffering on planet Earth. That would be much more helpful to put their resources at good use here. And then at a certain point, there is an interview with the Guardian. You mention caregivers that should be. Can you speculate a little more about that?
Yes. So I think today's economy, like in Japan, what's happening is actually, so there are some rich people, right? But the number is say 1%. But they are consuming a lot of cars and houses, and they're flying all the time and so on. So we are, producing those luxury goods for them, like Rolex watches, sports cars, SUVs, and so on. And other people, what are we doing? Of course, we buy some luxury goods that are not necessarily essential for living, but we spend a lot of time doing like internet, SNS, and games on the smartphone, and we watch a lot of YouTube, and these are basically free, and we spend a lot of time, and basically they're wasting time. But so massive amount of money and energy is invested in those entertainment, advertisement, but they are basically, kind of drugs. We are addicted to them, but they are not making us happy. So who is actually making something that are essential? We need more food, we need more energy, we need more education, and we need more medical care, especially during the pandemic. Those essential goods and works are really marginalized in Japan, but also in the other developed countries. We are spending, if we look at our industry, we're producing simply luxurious cars, and other luxurious clothes, like in Italy and Japan, and they are not really essential for living. And then we spend a lot of time in YouTube, SNS, and so on. So our economy is really destroying itself. It's very fragile because no one is producing essential goods. And even if those are engaged in essential works, they are getting very low paid jobs. They are very precarious because these jobs are not highly evaluated. We evaluate only those advertisement, consultants, and other unnecessary things. So my point is, we need to really radically rethink the evaluation of what is more valuable and what is not really necessary. So my point is like those luxury goods and other those drugs, the SNS, games, and smartphones, and these things can be sort of devalued. They can be valued less. and we value more on agriculture, food production, hospitals, medical cares, education, arts, and those essential care works can be much more highly valued. And we can do this by, of course, one way is introducing a maximum income, but we can also put some tax on extra tax on sports cars, or we can do the extra tax for luxury hotels. So we can do those tax, we can use tax to redistribute the wealth from those non-essential in sectors to more essential sectors.
You're perfectly aware that degrowth suffers from a bad reputation. I mean, the usual argument is you want to bring us back to the Middle Age, okay? They say. Why is this not the case according to you? I mean, can we have a degrowth without becoming sad and depressed?
I'm not saying that we should abandon all the cars and the smartphones. Like smartphone is, I think, an easy example, because smartphone, I need smartphone. I need this computer to have this interview. So I'm not advocating that we should throw them away and then go back to the Middle Ages where there was no electricity. My point is simply, we don't need to buy iPhone every 2 years. Very simple. And so we can use our smartphones for many years. We can repair them. But for example, Apple doesn't allow us to open the iPhone, right? So we have to kind of buy the new one when it's broken. We have to pay a lot of money to change the batteries and so on. And this is a nonsense. So I think there are a lot of discussion about the right to repair.
It's changing now. It's changing.
It's changing. Yes. But that's very compatible with the idea of degrowth, I would say. But in Japan, that kind of idea hasn't been discussed. So I'm introducing that kind of ideas. But also another example would be fast fashion. Japanese people like Italians like fashionable. But the number of clothes production is growing so fast. Like in the last 20 years, the number itself has doubled in the last 20 years. But it's because of the fast fashion. Why don't we reduce by half again? Why don't we go back to 20 years ago? It's not Middle Ages. I'm just saying 20 years ago. That would not make us, naked. We can still have a lot of clothes, but today it's simply excessive. The same thing can be said about, about flights. We fly too much. For example, we can ban, like in France, we can ban the short-term domestic flights if we can move by train within 2 or 3 hours. So that kind of thing, we can start by that kind of thing, and then we can develop a new way of living. I think that can be introduced within capitalism, but at the same time, it opens up a more space where we can try something, go beyond capitalism.
It makes a lot of sense. You quote COVID as a proof that quick change can happen. But recently, I've interviewed Greta Thunberg, and I made the same point where, I mean, the COVID has shown that radical change can happen quickly. But that doesn't seem the case with climate change, because as you perfectly know, I mean, after the pandemics, we could push faster on the renewables energy and so on, but we didn't go and also with the war in Ukraine, but we didn't go that way. We went back to carbon and with other, let me put this. And Greta Thunberg explained to me that we as humans think about the climate crisis as something distant from us, even if, I mean, even both geographically and in time. We tend to think that it's not going to happen tomorrow, so we can keep doing business as usual. Why do you differ? Why do you think that COVID has shown that quick change can happen also for more urgent things like climate change?
I think you are right. I mean, COVID pandemic and the climate crisis are a little bit different, especially in terms of the length.
Yeah.
We also need to do the system transformation for a very long time with regards to the climate crisis. You know, in the pandemic, it was, especially at the beginning, we tried our best do the lockdown only for a month or so. And then that's why we could do it. But now, after 2 years or 3 years, we are kind of bored and we go back to normal. We don't care about COVID. I think so. The same thing could happen. I think even with the climate crisis, we would say, okay, whatsoever, we'll somehow deal with it and so on. But I think one experience is still very important because, you know, capitalism was actually stopped. Capitalism stopped, or the government or the society forced capitalism to stop for the sake of our life. Capitalism is the system of constant growing, but at the same time, this is fundamentally based upon the freedom of moving. You know, we can move to any cities and even countries. So that we can find our jobs. But that was not the case in feudalism, for example. You know, feudalism, people were tied to the land. So, but during the pandemic, we actually given up this freedom of moving for the sake of protecting our society. And also, in addition, the government intervened in the market, and they, you know, ordered some companies to produce certain things, and then they ordered to close department stores and other places where people gather for the sake of protecting people's lives and so on. So we actually learned from this experience that, you know, we have been told for so many years that the government cannot do anything against, and the government shouldn't do anything. But actually, the government can order or intervene in the market. The government can also provide a lot of money for people who lost their jobs and so on. So, and then we can actually even sort of forcefully stop capitalist economic activities. So there are emergency break in capitalism. We have been told that there's no break, so we just have to keep going on. But it was possible or to do this, to pull the emergency brake. And at least we now know that we can, at least now we know that there is this brake.
They exist.
Why don't we try to use this brake again, but in a different manner maybe? So we can simply do the same thing in terms of climate crisis, but at least it opens up more political imaginaries and possibilities to try something very radical for the sake of protecting our lives in the age of climate crisis.
Okay. Listen, I've got still three questions for you. Okay. Can we stop 1 second because my time here is expiring and we reconnect immediately. Okay. I stop and we reconnect in 10 seconds. Okay. Thank you very much.